we've got our piccolo yarn and our 3mm needles. Now I'm working on circular needles because I prefer that, but this pattern is worked flat, so you could just work straight needles if you prefer. So we're going to cast on however many stitches you need for the size that you're doing, which will be in the pattern. Now I'm doing long tail cast on, so you want something that's got a little bit of stretch in it. So if you haven't done long tail cast on before, I'll put a link to our long tail cast on video at the top. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just keep going until you've got the right amount of stitches, which will tell you in the pattern. I've cast on the correct number of stitches, and now we're going to work our first row, which is a wrong side row, and this is simply knitting and purling. It's a 1x1 rib, so we're going to start by purling the first stitch, yarn between the needles to the back, knit the next one, yarn between the needles to the front, to purl, and we're just working our way across, knit, purl, 1x1 rib. Now if you want any tips on how to do a slightly neater rib using combination knitting, I'll put a link to that in the top and you can have a look at that video. Okay, so we've worked our 1x1 rib border, and now we're going to move on to the slip stitch rib. Now our first 2 stitches are the selvage, so that when this is seamed the pattern is continuous all the way around. So we're going to knit the first stitch and purl the second stitch, and now we're going to start on the slip stitch rib repeat. So we've got a knit, and then we've got a slip purlwise with the yarn at the back, and then we've got a knit, yarn to the front between the needles, and a purl, and we're going to just work that all the way across. So knit, slip with the yarn held at the back purlwise, knit, knit, purl, and just keep working across. Knit, slip, knit, purl, knit, slip, knit, and purl, and just carry on until you get to the end of the row. Okay, so now we're going to work our way back along the wrong side row, and here we will be purling the knit, slip, knit, and knitting the purl stitch from the right side row. So we're going to start with purl 3, and then knit 1. Now you can see which will be the knit one, because it's just following those knit stitches up on the ribbon. So purl 3, 1, purl the slip stitch, purl the third stitch, knit 1, and we're just going to repeat this to the end. When you've finished the cuff section, you can now move on to the shaping of the thumb. So all the increases are along the side of the ribbing, so that it keeps this nice structured section to the glove, and the thumb expands out of this reverse stockinette here. So this is the right hand glove which I've done, so the pattern that I'm working on is the left hand glove. It's the same pattern, it's just that your increases will be in a slightly different place. So looking at the pattern, it will tell you how many repeats of the slip stitch rib to do on this next shaping row, and then I've finished with a slip stitch. So the next stitch I'm going to do is a knit front and back. So we put the needle in as though to knit, wrap the yarn around and pull it through, but don't slide the stitch from the left needle. Instead, you're going to take the right hand needle and manoeuvre it round to the back and insert it into the back loop of the same stitch. Then we're wrapping the yarn round as usual and pushing that through. So now we've increased 2 stitches from that one. Now our next stitch is going to be a purl front and back. So we're going to bring the yarn between the needles to the front, insert as though to purl, wrap the yarn around, pull it through, but again don't slide the stitch off the needle. Now we're going to bring our right needle tip underneath the back of the stitch and up into the middle and wrap the yarn as though to purl and pop that through, and then we've increased another stitch. So now we're just going to pop a stitch marker on, and we're going to carry on with the rest of the slip stitch rib to the end. So we'll bring our yarn to the back, we knit, slip, knit, purl, back to knit, slip, knit, purl, and we're going to repeat that until the last 3 stitches, and then we've got a knit, slip, knit. Now we're on step 2 for the shaping, which is the wrong side row. So we've just worked purl 3, knit 1 all the way along until we've got to our marker. So when we've got to our marker, we've slipped it across onto our needle, and now we just need to move the yarn to the back, and we're knitting 3, which is our first 3 thumb stitches. And then after we've done that, we're back to purl 3, knit 1, and we're just going to repeat that until we get to the very last stitch where we're going to purl 1. Step 3, so we're back on a right side row, and I've just worked the slip stitch ribbing, so knit, purl, knit, slip, the required number of times per the pattern. So my last stitch was a slip, so now we're just going to knit 1, and we're going to pop on our second stitch marker. Now it's helpful to put different coloured stitch markers on just so you can remember which one is which. Bring our yarn to the front, and we're going to purl these 3 central thumb stitches, and we've come to our next marker, so we're going to just slip this straight across and then back to the pattern, bring the yarn to the back, knit, slip, knit, purl all the way to the last 3 stitches, and then we're doing knit, slip, knit. Step 4 is the same as step 2. So I've purled 3, knit 1 all the way up to this first marker. Then I'm simply going to slip this marker across. Then I'm going to knit the central thumb stitches. Oops. And then we've got the next marker, we're just going to slip that straight across, and then we're back in the pattern of purl 3, knit 1 all the way to the last stitch where we're going to purl 1. Now we're on step 5, and again we're working the slip stitch rib up to the marker. Then we're going to just pop the marker across, then we're going to purl front and back, so we'll bring the yarn to the front and we purl in the front, leave the stitch on the needle, bring it round underneath the stitch at the back and up into the middle, wrap the yarn around and pull that through, and that's our first increase. Now we're going to purl the next stitch, which is our central thumb stitch. So we've just got one at the moment, but after every increase this central stitch will increase by 2. So on the next repeat we'll have 3 purl stitches in between the increases, then 5 and 7, so on. But on this row there's just the one. Okay, so we've worked our central stitch, and now we're going to do our second increase. Now this time we're going to purl into the back and then into the front. So we take our needle behind and underneath the stitch, pop it up through the middle, wrap the yarn round and pull it through, and then we bring our needle round and purl into the front. After the increase we just need to continue with our slip stitch rib pattern, so we can pop the stitch marker across and take our yarn between the needles to the back, and then we just knit, slip, knit and purl until we get to the last 3 stitches. Then we've just got a knit, slip, knit. So just continue along the row. Step 6 is back to our wrong side row, so we simply purl 3, knit 1 and carry on until we get to our first marker. Then we're just popping the marker across and we're knitting these central thumb stitches which are between the 2 markers. Okay, then we're slipping our marker across, and then we're back to purl 3, knit 1, oops, right along to the end. That is our 4-row repeat. So the first row of the repeat we're working our slip stitch rib to the first marker, slip the marker, then we purl in front and back. So in the front, take the needle to the back, through, then we're simply going to purl the stitches in between until we get to that last stitch, and then in this last stitch of the thumb we purl into the back first and then into the front, slip the marker and continue with our slip stitch rib. On the return row on the wrong side we're going to purl 3, knit 1, simply knit the central thumb stitches, continue to purl 3, knit 1 to the end. Then on our third row of the repeat we're doing a slip stitch rib to the marker, purling the stitches between the markers, slip stitch rib to the end. Then on the wrong side return we're doing the purl 3, knit 1, knit the thumb stitches, continue to purl 3 and knit 1, and we simply carry on that 4-row repeat until you have the correct number of stitches between the markers, which will be explained in the pattern. When you've finished working the increases for the thumb, this is what it should look like. You should have this lovely triangle of reverse stockinette on the right side, and then on the wrong side we've got the stockinette stitch. Now we're going to split the thumb and the hand sections so we can work these separately and then seam them together at the end. So I'm on my right side row, so you'll have worked up to where it tells you in the pattern depending on the size, and I've done my normal slip stitch ribbing to the marker. Now we can remove the marker, and we're going to purl all along these thumb stitches until we get to the next marker. The knitting of the thumb section is now finished, so we're going to move on to working on the rest of the hand. So I've got the right side facing me, and I'm just going to fold the thumb stitches down out of the way, and I'm going to join the yarn to the stitches to the left of the thumb. So if we just take our yarn, and we just need to follow the slip stitch ribbing pattern. So our first stitch is a knit, and then we've got a slip, and then a knit and a purl. So we're just back to the normal slip stitch ribbing until we get to the end of the row. So knit, slip, knit and purl till we get to the last 3 stitches, and then we're just going to knit, slip and knit. I've worked back along the wrong side doing the normal purl 3 knit 1 until I've got to the gap here. Now what we need to do is cast on 4 stitches. Now you can do this with knitted cast on or whichever way you find easiest, but I'm just going to show you how to do the thumb method, or backward loop method as it's called. So what I'm going to do is take the working yarn and just hold it in my fingers like this, and then I'm going to bring my thumb over the top and round to create a loop on my thumb, and then just take your needle tip and slide it up the back of your thumb to catch that loop and pull that on. So if we do that again, you hold the yarn with your fingers, bring your thumb around over the top underneath, right needle tip slides up the back of your thumb to catch the yarn and pull that on. So we need 4, so that's 2, 3, 4. So there I've cast on 4 stitches which will go along the base of the thumb when we seam. So now I need to carry on along the row with a knit 1 purl 3, but what we need to do is close this gap where the thumb is. So I'm just going to fold out of the way, and we're going to carry on knitting. So you can see that the thumb is folded up there behind. So my first stitch, as you can see there, is a knit. So we're going to knit, and we're going to try and pull that quite tight just to make sure that that closes the gap. And then we're going to purl 3, knit 1, and just carry on knit 1 purl 3 to the last 2 stitches where you will do a knit 1 and purl 1. We're working back along the right side row now, so it's just our usual knit, slip, knit, purl. So I've got to the gap that we've closed with the cast on stitches. My last stitch was a purl, so now I'm going to do a knit, slip, knit. Now the cast on stitches can be a little bit tight, so just take it slow and try not to pull them too tight when you're working them. So that's a knit, a slip. I'm just going to use my finger to hold it, make sure it doesn't slip off. Knit and purl, and then we're just carrying on knit, slip, knit, purl. The slip stitch ribbing is done, and I've done a few rows of 1 by 1 rib at the top. So now we just need to bind off. So I'm going to use the knit two together through the back loop bind off, which should give this a little bit of stretch but still keep the structure so we don't get that kind of flaring around the top of the glove. So we're going to start by knitting two together through the back loop. So insert your right hand needle into the first and the second stitch through the back loop like this, and just knit those two together. And then we're going to pass this stitch back onto the left needle purlwise, so we're literally just slipping it back on, and then we're going to go back in and knit the next two stitches through the back loop, pass the stitch back purlwise and knit two together through the back loop, and you just continue to do that all the way along this row until you've got just one stitch left, and then you can cut the yarn, but make sure you leave about 3 or 4 times the length of the glove down here, 3 or 4 times this length. So that'll be 75, maybe 90 centimeters long, just so you can use that then for seaming to sew up this side of the glove. The knitting of the glove is now complete, so this is what it should look like. I'm going to start by sewing up the thumb. So if we just take this with the right side facing us and fold the two ends of the thumb together, what we're looking to do is to sew just down this straight edge. At the moment we're not looking to sew along this hole here, we're not looking to close this gap yet, we're literally just sewing down this straight edge of the thumb, preferably with mattress stitch or something like that that's invisible, but you can do whichever you find easiest. So I'm using the tail from the thumb cast off, so we don't need to join any yarn, we can literally just thread the needle and start to sew. The vertical seam of the thumb is now closed, so the next step is to sew along the extra cast on stitches that we made in the hand that join the base of the thumb. So you've got two options, you can either do this on the right side and work across that way, or you could take your needle through the hole to the wrong side, just stretch the glove out so you can see where the gap is, squeeze that together, and then just begin to stitch along on the wrong side. So we're just going to work along until this gap is closed, and then we can move on to the next step. The vertical thumb seam's done, and I've finished sewing the horizontal seam at the base there. So the only thing that's left to do now is to sew up the side. Now I've got this nice long tail that we left after the bind off. So you just need to hold the sides together, line those up. Try and line your stitches up as best you can. If you want to pin this to make sure that you get everything lined up as you go along, then that's an option. I'd probably recommend just doing a couple of overhand loops at this top end just to keep it a bit stronger. And then just work down with mattress stitch or whichever seaming method you prefer. I'm just going into these end stitches so that hopefully then when we've finished it should be seamless, so you should just get this nice effect of the slip stitch rib going all around the seam, so it should be pretty much invisible. So once you've got down to the bottom, the only thing that's left to do then is to weave in your ends and you're all done.